Newsday continues here on One News Now Business. I'm Dani Laurel. Here are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate fronts. President Bongbong Marcos led the inauguration for the first section of the NLEX Connector project. In his speech, Marcos Jr. said the project will reduce the travel time from Caloocan to Manila to just 5 minutes. He added that the project is expected to ease the movement of cargo in Metro Manila from north to south. The president also vowed to continue and complete infrastructure projects of the previous administration. The first section of the 23 billion peso NLEX Connector project is a 5-kilometer elevated expressway. The project in its entirety is expected to cater to around 35,000 vehicles daily once it is fully operational. The Philippines is seeking a $400 million loan from the World Bank to support digital transformation initiatives. The World Bank is expected to approve the country's first digital transformation development policy financing in December. The project aims to improve digital government service delivery and foster pro-competition infrastructure policies. It is also seen to help expand financial inclusion through digital finance and boost business growth in digital services. The national government's gross borrowings declined by 16.5% as of the end of January. Data from the Bureau of Treasury shows that gross borrowing stood at over 366 billion pesos in January. That is lower than the 439 billion pesos logged in the same period of last year. Now, during the month of January, external debt accounted for a little over half, or 51% of the total gross borrowings. Gross foreign borrowings doubled to 187 billion pesos from 93 billion pesos. And of the total gross foreign borrowings, dollar-denominated global bonds amounted to more than 163 billion pesos. Meanwhile, gross domestic debt fell by 48% to 179 billion pesos. On to some global updates. First Citizen Bank is said to be in advanced talks to acquire Silicon Valley Bank. That's after its collapse earlier this month. Adam Hay reports for us on Bloomberg TV.
We know that it was down to these two bidders. We've been waiting really over the last couple of weeks to see what essentially happens to Silicon Valley Bank, as I'm sure a lot of the employees are waiting to see as well.
And this is what we wanted, didn't we, Heidi? I think this is what investors want, right? They want regulators to move quick and to give substantial updates on what's happening here. And it's quite important here that they gave some information on Sunday evening, which it looks like we're starting to get now. So it looks like we at least have one bidder in pole position for this asset, which, as we mentioned, has been at the home of the FDIC now for the past 2 weeks. And it's one huge test of confidence for investors over the last few weeks, and one noticeable kind of move from regulators has been these Sunday evening kind of developments where they're able to give information to the markets before the start of trading on Monday, and can't really kind of overstate how much of an important move that is, because of course a lot of this is about investor confidence. A lot of this is about a sense that the regulators and the authorities are doing enough to stem the problems, and clearly that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing a quite significant development in the fact that these SVB assets are going to be taken over by this other lender.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Dani Laurel. Now, heads up motorists, oil companies will implement another round of rollbacks for pump prices. Effective tomorrow, gas prices will be cheaper by 85 centavos per liter, while diesel products will see a reduction of 1 peso and 30 centavos per liter. Kerosene prices will be slashed by 1 peso and 90 centavos per liter. Water concessionaire Maynilad has started implementing supply augmenting measures to meet the expected surge in demand this summer. A spokesperson from Maynilad told Business World that the company is concerned about the onset of El Nino in the latter half of the month. The company says that while water level at Angat Dam is still at a healthy level, there would be less rainfall to replenish the Angat and Ipo dams. Maynilad's supply augmentation measures include the reactivation of deep wells and the commissioning of modular treatment plants. However, the said measures are only expected to mitigate the impact of a supply shortage if the dam's water level continues to decline. Now, the second phase of schedule and terminal assignment rationalization program at the NAIA will begin in April. Under the STAR program, international flights will be reassigned to Terminals 1 and 3. The Manila International Airport Authority said 5 more airlines will be transferred to Terminal 3 by April 16th. Philippine Airlines will also relocate its flights to and from Singapore, Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, and Phnom Penh to Terminal 1. The MIA expects up to 25% increase in the capacity of Terminal 2, which will become an all-domestic facility. The Bureau of Internal Revenue has allowed taxpayers to file their tax returns and make payments anywhere in the country. Taxpayers can now file their 2022 annual income tax return and pay taxes anywhere on or before April 17th without the penalties imposed for the wrong venue filing. BIR Commissioner Romeo Lumagi Jr. said he wanted to provide the public the luxury of filing and paying their taxes at the most convenient place. Lumagi also reminded taxpayers not to use ghost receipts, as this may lead to revocation of the license of involved accountants and imprisonment. Credit Suisse faces a threat of a possible investigation and disciplinary action over how top managers ran the bank in the lead up to its collapse. The full story courtesy of Bloomberg.
What were some of the details that emerged in terms of what we know, how the top management personnel, what were they were doing, their decision making leading into those last weeks and days?
Yeah, Heidi, this is something that's kind of hung over Credit Suisse, not just in the kind of the most recent period of turmoil of the past 2 weeks, but of course the last 2 years, how people have evaluated how they were going to kind of redo the strategy at the bank, how they were going to kind of bring back franchises that had really lost their competitive edge. And what's being mooted in this local report coming out over the weekend is essentially that there were some kind of fairly systemic failures by some of the top managers at Credit Suisse in various areas. And just to run you one quote from the FINRA president, which I think is quite telling of the extent of what they're thinking right now, is that, quote, often it was not clear who was responsible for what. And of course, that speaks to division heads and people running large areas of the business responsible for hundreds of $millions in revenue. And if that, of course, was the case, that they weren't, they didn't know what they were doing, they didn't know who was in the driving seat, and indeed, there was a lack of taking responsibility within various business divisions. And of course, that's quite telling as to how we got into the position that we're into today, where essentially you had to get a Swiss government-led bailout and a tie-up with UBS. Now, how investors kind of come off the back of this, I mean, really, for investors, this is a little bit too late. But of course, everyone wants to know what happened, and everyone wants to know more details about specifically what went wrong at Credit Suisse.
Meanwhile, Finance Chief Ben Diokno says the Bangko Sentral may pause policy tightening at its next meeting in May. Secretary Diokno sits as a member of the Monetary Board, says the BSP has, quote, done enough. He explains the impact of rate hikes has yet to be absorbed by the economy, considering that monetary policy works with a lag. Diokno also says non-monetary measures are more effective in curbing inflation. Last week, the Bangko Sentral raised rates by 25 basis points, bringing the benchmark rate to a 16-year high of 6.25%. Now, since May of 2022, the Monetary Board has hiked rates by 425 basis points to arrest inflation. The national government plans to launch a retail dollar bond offering next month. Finance Secretary Ben Diokno said the offering could range between $2 and $3 billion. He explained that the bonds will be treated as domestic debt and will be marketed to overseas Filipino workers and even residents in the Philippines. Diokno said he is confident that the offering, being tax-free and dollar-denominated, will get a good reception. And those are the top business stories of the hour. I'm Danny Laurel. Join us again at 2 p.m. We are One News, all sides, all the time.